Round the World Lit Audio, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Episode 2, Awakening, Kamala, with the Childlike People, full narration script. Channel intro. Welcome to Around the World Lit Audio, the greatest novels ever written, from every corner of the world, in English. New chapter every week. Free to listen. Chapter recap. In Episode 1, Siddhartha grew up as the perfect Brahmin son, beautiful, learned, loved, and dissatisfied in the specific way of someone given everything worth having, and finding it insufficient. He stood motionless all night until his father let him go. 3 years with the samanas taught him to leave the self temporarily, and showed him this was not enough. He met the Buddha in the grove, recognized genuine enlightenment, and walked away, telling the Buddha he could not walk someone else's path. Govinda stayed. Siddhartha walked into the world alone for the first time, feeling free and feeling the question, what now? Episode 2, Awakening, Kamala, and with the Childlike People. Awakening. He walked through the forest with the specific quality of someone who has shed something heavy, and is still adjusting to the lightness. The Brahmin robes were gone. The ascetic's cloth was gone. The framework of his father's tradition, and the framework of the samanas tradition, and the framework of the Buddha's teaching, all gone. He was Siddhartha, walking through a forest, with nothing. He stopped at a tree. He sat down. He thought, what do I actually know? He had known the text since childhood. He had known the practices of the samanas. He had heard the Buddha's teaching and understood it completely. He could discourse on Brahman and Atman, on the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, on the traditions of his father's caste, and the counter-traditions of the ascetics. He thought, and none of this is me. None of this is Siddhartha. These are things I have learned. They are clothes I have worn. But who is the one who learned them? Who is the one who wore them? This is the question the novel has been building toward. The question that Siddhartha's dissatisfaction had always been pointing at. Not what is the truth, but who is asking. He sat with the question, and something happened. It happened without drama, not a vision, not a light, not the specific theatrical apparatus that spiritual experiences are sometimes described with. Something simply shifted. The world came into focus in a way it had not been in focus before. The tree he was sitting under was a tree, completely, actually, specifically itself. Not a symbol of something, not a manifestation of Brahman, not an objective perception in a world of illusion, but a tree, with bark and leaves and roots and the specific quality of this particular tree, in this particular forest on this particular morning. The bird sang. It was a bird singing. The river moved. It was a river moving. Everything was itself. Siddhartha wept. He wept with the specific quality of someone who has been looking for something for a very long time, and has found it in the last place they expected, not in the teachings, not in the practices, not in the wisdom of any master, but in the simple fact of being awake in the world, present to it, without the filter of doctrine or framework or the accumulated apparatus of seeking. He stood. He was hungry. He had not eaten, had been fasting, as the samanas did, as a spiritual practice. He was hungry in the way of a person, whose body is making a simple biological request, and for the first time, this request seemed not like an obstacle to spiritual progress, but like something to be honored. His body was hungry. He would eat. He walked toward the city. Kamala. The city was called samsara in the novel's moral geography, not literally, but the city is the world of desire and pleasure and commerce and human entanglement that the Sanskrit word names, the cycle of birth and death and craving that the spiritual traditions were trying to escape. Siddhartha walked into it. He walked in with the specific confidence of someone who has been trained in two very different disciplines, and has left both of them and is therefore, in a paradoxical way, freer than either tradition would have made him. He was not attached to wealth. He had lived without it for years. He was not attached to poverty. He had decided that poverty was not the answer. He was, for the moment, simply a young man walking into a city. He saw a woman. She was being carried in a litter, a courtesan, a woman of the highest class of the profession, with the specific quality of someone who has made beauty and pleasure into an art and has risen to the top of it. Her name was Kamala. Siddhartha looked at her. He felt, looking at her, something he had not felt before. Not the abstract spiritual love that the Brahmin tradition taught, not the universal compassion that the Buddha taught, but the specific, particular, physical desire of a man looking at a beautiful woman and wanting to know her. He followed her to her garden. He said, I want to learn from you. I want you to be my teacher in the art of love. Kamala looked at him with the expression of someone who has heard many things said at her garden gate, and has developed reliable procedures for assessing them. She said, you are a forest monk. You have nothing. What could you offer me? He said, what do you want? She said, I want fine clothes. I want money. I want gifts worthy of me. He said, I can get these things. I have a mind and I have will, and I have learned the arts of thinking and waiting, and fasting, and these, I have found. are worth more than most things in the world of commerce? She considered him. She said, "Go to a merchant named Kamaswami. Tell him I sent you. Learn the art of trade. Come back when you have something to offer." She gave him a kiss, the first kiss in the novel, delivered matter-of-factly as a sample of what she had to teach, a specific and practical demonstration of the subject matter. He left. With the childlike people, Kamaswami was a successful merchant, a man of business, of calculation, of the specific intelligence that commerce requires, which is different from the intelligence that philosophy requires but is not inferior to it. He received Siddhartha with the skepticism of a practical man encountering someone who comes recommended by a courtesan and claims to have skills. He said, "What can you do?" Siddhartha said, "I can think, I can wait, I can fast." Kamaswami said, "These are not commercial skills." Siddhartha said, "They are the most important commercial skills. A man who cannot think will make bad decisions. A man who cannot wait will take bad prices. A man who cannot fast will make desperate agreements. Everything else can be learned." Kamaswami hired him. Siddhartha learned commerce. He learned it with the same thoroughness he had applied to everything, the texts, the ascetic practices, the art of meditation. He learned accounting and negotiation and the assessment of goods and the reading of markets. He learned quickly, because he had learned how to learn. He became good at it. He became Kamala's student too. The education was dual, commerce and love, the two primary arts of the world he had entered, and he applied himself to both with the full attention that was always his characteristic. The years passed. Siddhartha lived in the city. He wore fine clothes. He ate well. He made money for Kamaswami. He spent time with Kamala. He was good at the life, better than most, because he had not grown up in it, and had no habit of anxiety about it, no fear of losing it, no desperate clinging to the pleasures and the wealth. And he noticed, gradually, that the people around him had a quality he did not share. He called them the childlike people, not with contempt, but with the specific quality of observation that comes from standing slightly outside the thing you are observing. They loved their money with a love that was proportionate to the way money can actually be lost, with the fear and the urgency of people for whom the loss would be total. They loved their pleasures with the desperation of people who cannot imagine anything better. They suffered in the way that the city makes people suffer, not the grand suffering of war or earthquake, but the small constant suffering of wanting more, of fearing loss, of comparing themselves to others, of being bored and then being overstimulated, and then being bored again. Siddhartha watched this. He was not immune to it. He was in it, was playing the game, was wearing the clothes, was eating the food, was sleeping with Kamala. But he watched himself playing the game with the residual detachment of someone who has been trained to observe the self, and cannot entirely stop observing even when the self is doing things it has never done before. He said to Kamala one evening, "We are alike, you and I. We are different from the others. We do not get lost in things the way they get lost." Kamala said, "Perhaps, but the difference is that I was born knowing this. You had to travel a very long way to learn it." He said, "Does that make us friends?" She said, "It makes us something." "I am not sure friends is the right word." She said, "Be careful, Siddhartha. The river does not always stay outside." He did not understand this yet. The years continued. He played dice. He won and lost money with the equanimity of someone for whom money was not the point. He conducted business for Kamaswami. He learned every pleasure the city had to offer and found each one, in succession, insufficient, not because he was spiritual but because he was alive in a way the pleasures could not quite reach. He began to drink. He began to gamble with the specific urgency of someone trying to feel something, trying to make the stakes real, trying to manufacture a sensation of risk that the equanimity prevented him from feeling naturally. He began to dream of the river. The river had been there at the beginning, in his childhood in his father's house. A river had been nearby. He had crossed a river to leave. He had heard, in the years of the Samanas, that rivers were considered sacred, that something important was held in the sound of running water. He dreamed of the river, and in the dream the river said something that he could not quite hear on waking. He was losing himself. Not in the dramatic way of a man who collapses. He was still functioning, still successful by the measures of the city, still the same Siddhartha in appearance. But inside, something was eroding. The careful distance he had kept from the city's pleasures was closing. He was becoming the childlike people he had observed with such detached attention. He recognized this, and the recognition arrived at the same moment, as a dream of Kamala's songbird, a bird she kept in a golden cage, that sang beautifully, that she had found one morning dead. She had thrown it away. She had wept briefly, and then she had gone on. He thought, "That bird is me." He left the city the same night. He did not say goodbye to Kamaswami. He did not say goodbye to Kamala. He tried, but she was not where he could find her, and perhaps this was right, because some departures cannot be said goodbye to properly and have to be simply made. He walked out of the city in the direction of the river. He did not know why. He knew only that the river was where he was supposed to be. Episode Transition. You have reached the end of episode 2 of Siddhartha, by Hermann Hesse. Siddhartha has been awakened, has entered the world, has learned love and commerce and pleasure, and has lost himself slowly in the process. He is walking toward the river. In episode 3, the river speaks. Vasudeva the ferryman is waiting, and something happens at the river that Siddhartha could not have reached any other way, not through the Brahmin texts, not through the same in his austerities, not through the Buddha's teaching, and not through Kamala's art, only through having lived all of it and lost all of it. Episode 3 is available next week. Subscribe to Around the World Lit Audio so you never miss a chapter. A new episode arrives every week.